I think the shininess of Connor being back and the fact that we know he's going to fight Chandler, we have a pretty good idea it's on the horizon. I think that alone has enticed me enough to find it interesting. And I will tell you what I do like the format of prospects versus veterans. That I think they nailed that.
Oh, you and I are going to disagree on this.
And now, Brendan Thiccc Schaub.
I think last time I spoke to you was in person. You came on Food Truck Diaries.
Yeah.
And you didn't do the commentating gig yet. And I was vying for it. I'm like, we got to get going here. UFC, what are we doing? And they listened. Right. I like to take credit for it, but I had nothing to do with it. If anything, I probably hurt your career. But
no, I think you were the straw that broke the camel's back. I really do. Yeah. I think they saw that Food Truck Diaries, and they saw my desire. They saw your approval, your stamp of approval, and were like, obviously.
Yeah, Dana was like, Schaub gave her the green light. All right, let's get her on.
Put her in.
Sign it. Pick her up. It's like you're just doing the damn thing. And I think most people expected this, but it has to feel good, right? To get that validation. And I see you being involved in even more cards. Obviously the Contender Series, the Dana White Contender Series you're doing, and that's kind of where you get your start with the UFC. But so that's expected and that show's big, but now you're involved even in the Ultimate Fighter, the post show, which we're fans of here. And I'll start there with the Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah.
Were you a fan of Ultimate Fighter before doing this post show? I mean, obviously you're in the business, but were you like a diehard fan of the Ultimate Fighter?
I was a diehard fan of the Ultimate Fighter in the beginning.
Yes.
Like early days of the Ultimate Fighter. It's big. It's a big part of the reason. Between that and Pride, that's what got me into MMA.
Same.
However, there was definitely a lull in my interest over, I would say, the most recent,
And I think that's fair to say. I think even Dana, like, it was a bad product. Like, it was tough, and when they went behind the paywall.
It was tough. In fact, it was tough.
Yeah, legit tough, like TOUGH tough, not TUF tough. That show is tough to watch, and stars weren't coming out of it.
Yeah.
And then now it kind of piqued my interest, and obviously the general fans' interest, because you have Connor involved. It's weird because I want to love, right? It was my ticket to the Chocolate Factory, like Ultimate Fighter. I'm an alumni. It's dear to my heart. I was a finalist on there. It gave me everything I have in my life now. So I ride and die for the UFC. I bleed UFC. I bleed the Ultimate Fighter. And I was so excited to watch it. And you ever like have a favorite movie, like when you're a kid, and then you go back and watch, you tell like your friend or your girlfriend, whatever, you're like, you got to see this movie. It's so good. And you're like, oh, it doesn't hold up. And it's not that the Ultimate Fighter is a bad product. It's very well done, but I'm starting to think it's like, oh, does this kind of, the way it's organized, the way it's going down, like have we moved on from this? Is it that, or it was missing something. Now the second episode got me kind of back into it. I thought the second one was better. I don't know what it is. If the format just doesn't work on regular TV now, I don't know what it is. But listen, I'm a degenerate. I'll watch it all.
Yeah, I think your analogy is perfect and really hits home, because I'm in this phase of trying to introduce my son to like movies from the 80s and 90s that I really thought were amazing, but that are still, and they're adult, but like still okay for a kid his age to watch. Kindergarten Cop, for instance.
Oh, great movie.
In my mind, this is like Oscar-worthy acting.
It's not a tumor. Yeah, hell yeah. I love that movie.
It is a good movie, but you realize how corny a lot of the 90s movies in particular were. But I digress. In terms of tough, like I think the shininess of Connor being back and the fact that we know he's going to fight Chandler, we have a pretty good idea it's on the horizon. I think that alone has enticed me enough to find it interesting. And I will tell you what I do like the format of prospects versus veterans. That I think they nailed that.
Oh, you and I are going to disagree on this. It's my biggest issue with the show. Now, listen, this is coming from a guy who was a prospect and had to fight a veteran and lost in the finales to a veteran. When I signed up for that show, what I was told is it's guys who are
fighting other guys like me.
Yes. And then Roy Nelson there, who, you know, I'm a fan of mixed martial arts. I'm like, well, he's a former world champion. I just saw him fight Ben Rothwell. I have 3 fights. What are we doing here? And then obviously I ended up fighting him in the finale. So maybe it's that with me, but also just look at the way the fights are going down. Like when I saw prospect veterans, I'm like, oh, that's a terrible idea, because that atmosphere for a young prospect, it's a lot. For a veteran, it's like there's no fans. There's not that much pressure. And then you see how the fights are going. These veterans are starching these young dudes. Yeah. Like last night's episode, I'm like, oh, that kid's screwed. That poor kid. They're just getting annihilated. I know. First you get run through by a 17-year-old, and then, you know. Yeah. Like it's a tough go, man. And these veterans. But here's why I like it. Here's why I like it. Because, and I think it's maybe just, you know, your perspective is unique to your experience. I think I have a real soft spot for the guys who, it's like they were so close, or they were there and they were just so close to like really hitting their stride in the UFC, and for whatever reason it didn't pan out. I love the underdog. I think that's what I like about it. But then let me ask you this: you know, put your marketing hat on, take out your love for the Ultimate Fighter, take out how you work for the UFC. Let's say we're in a marketing meeting. There's nothing left, Brendan. Yeah, I know. Yeah, me neither. Yeah, I got nothing. But so if you're in a Hollywood meeting room and the Dana White's in there and Dana doesn't know you, there's no relationship. And if they brought that to me, I'd say, hold on, you're telling me these guys have already fought in the UFC? And they go, correct. And I go, and it didn't go well for them? They go, no. Okay, so then they're going to fight easier competition, probably do well because they're more experienced. The chance of a veteran winning the show is pretty high. So if that veteran wins and he's already failed in the UFC, what's the plan with him? You're telling me he's going to compete with the top 15? Who do we get? We give him more prospects to take out? Like, what do we do with the guy? Yeah. What do you do? Like, they're not going to compete with these top dogs. On the flip side of that, you know, if you look at it through the other side of that exact same lens, you know, you've got a lot of guys coming off of Contender Series in particular, where on that show, you only have to have one matchup to make it into the UFC. And you might get a really favorable matchup, or you might get a really unfavorable matchup. It's really kind of, I don't know, it's a roll of the dice on that show, much more so than it is for the Ultimate Fighter, because you've got a little bit longer to sort of prove yourself, build your brand, all that type of stuff. So while on one hand, you're like, okay, but he already proved that it's not going to pan out. Yeah. For the prospects, how are they going to pan out if they can't get through this series of veterans? If they can't get through these guys, then how are they going to fare in the UFC? So kind of, to me, it works both ways. And regardless, the cream's going to rise to the top, I think, whether it's a vet or whether it's a prospect. But I do agree with you that there's an inherent advantage for the vets. Now, we don't know yet what we have in terms of prospects. You know, this the guy that Connor keeps talking about, Lee. True. We may have some real superstars we just haven't seen yet. That's a fair point. There might be some prospect who can just annihilate these veterans, and Dana's like, shut your mouth. That's why we did this. But then also when Connor picked, you know, the kind of the prospects because his one guy's on the team, it's like, God, that was a mistake. And then also, can't we blend them? Does it have to be all prospects, all veterans? Like, couldn't we blend it so it's more favorable? Because I mean, Connor might have that one guy, and he might do his thing, but the rest, you know, it's gonna be tough on the rest of the guys. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, I like the show, and you know, but it does seem like Chandler, you know, made the smart pick. I feel like Chandler, he's a little more invested in it as far as like you see the coaching. He kind of zoned out when the guy was sharing his adoption story. Whatever. I love Chandler. He did not. Yeah, he did. That kid was like, hey, and you can see it was like kind of set up. He's like, they're like leaving practice. You know, Chandler has 2 adopted kids. He's like, hey man, I was adopted. And Chandler's like, oh cool. Where are you from? He's all, what? Chicago? He's like, right on, man. God puts all sorts of families together, and like kept going. The kid's like, oh, I thought this was going to be like my story, man. Stop. Yeah, just kidding. Chandler knows I love him. But he was like, yeah, very cool. Anyways, so you're adopted. No, but yeah, and the other caveat, and you know, I had Chandler on earlier, and he's like, yeah, we shot this in 4 weeks. Yes. And being an Ultimate Fighter, I'm like, oh my God, that is so fast. Yes. Aren't they normally like 12? I know they done a 12-week. Well, live was 12 because I was listening to Chiesa talk. Yes, live was 12. Mine was by the time you get to 7 weeks, I think they filmed 6, but you're there from 6 to 8 weeks, but 4 is flying. Now for the guys making weight, you know, it probably helps an advantage because I guess they're fighting a little sooner so they can kind of control that weight. But man, flying in 4 weeks is nuts. And also as far as like the team vibe goes, in 4 weeks, and you know, guys are losing, it's, you know, so the whole team aspect of it, I don't know. But again, I do like it.
Yeah, it's tough to gel and then in that amount of time for sure. But I think to some degree, if you're going to have Conor McGregor on a show, you're going to have to, you know, he can't live in Vegas for 13 weeks straight with his schedule.
That's a fair point too. I mean, he doesn't come to the weigh-ins. He hasn't been to a weigh-in yet.
Yeah, you know, and I'm going to ask John about that next week when we do our little sit down, our little react thing that we do. Because I'm sure there's reasonings, and I'm sure it has to do with how busy of an individual he is. And also, like, I think one thing that you got to keep in mind, and I thought it was really interesting the way Conor came out the gate, not only with like getting his guys to spar right off of the bat, but like he himself stepping in there. Mm-hmm. A lot of the show for me is Conor not just showing that like, oh, I can be a good coach and these are my guys, but like proving where he's at in terms of being ready to fight again.
Agreed. That's a big part of it. I think that's why a lot of people are tuning in. I do think, and did you watch the Conor doc? Did you watch the documentary?
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Still waiting for my check from being featured in that, whatever. But Conor, that doc, and I'm the biggest Conor fan. Like me and Casey, my producer, we love Conor. Like he's one of the reasons, you know, my show popped when it did. I'm the biggest Conor fan. I worked the Conor fight for Showtime. That's how I got in with Showtime. So I owe a lot of my career to Conor. Huge Conor dick rider here. I want to be completely transparent. But I think part of, you know, when you watch the documentary, and I think even the Ultimate Fighter House, like he's just a special person. He just realized, like, even when he went and visited the kids on last night's episode, you can just see like they're just the energy in the room, and he leaves and they're like, oh my God, that guy is electric. He's just he's something we've never seen before. And I think the doc did a good job because remember that doc wasn't like a happy story.
It was not.
Like the first episode shows like his come up and he's 14 and all that stuff. But the majority of that doc is, you know, I think he loses it's his 3 biggest fights that he loses. So it's not like a happy thing. But I think the takeaway from that, which that documentary made me sad because I don't think we'll ever see another Conor McGregor. So I got really sad. But then also B, I think it made people realize like he's this outlier. Like he's our Kobe Bryant. Like he has that Mamba mentality. Like he wants it so bad. And like he works his ass off because it's like for my mom or my brother who aren't, you know, in the game like we are, they just see the Conor antics and then they'll see his pay-per-view and he's like, oh, this guy's crazy. It's like, no. That craziness is what makes him special. I think that's kind of coming over in the Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah, no, the passion that he has for the sport is apparent because the reality is he didn't need to do this show. You know, like it's not like he needs a bigger profile, and it's certainly, even though I'm sure they condensed it partly for him, even 4 weeks, that's kind of a pain for him to not be able to do life the way that he wants to do it, right? And show up and have all these obligations and media obligations. You got to be here and you got to film at this time. Like, I'm sure that that's not his ideal way to spend his time, but the passion that he has for the sport and therefore the guys that are on the come up is evident to me. And I asked John Kavanaugh, I said, you know, is that magnetism that we see? Is that something that came along with the spotlight? And he said, no. He had that the moment, it was maybe a little bit different, but like, I think they met when Conor was 17 and he said he had that the day I met him. It's grown and it's matured and whatnot, but he's definitely an individual who's got something that you can't buy and something that you can't train or something that you can't try for. You either have it or you don't. I
agree. And I think to your point too, before we start talking about tough, you're saying one of the kind of interesting things is we're all waiting for the announcement of Conor versus Chandler. And I can't wait. My only kind of hang up with that is Dana was in a press conference recently and goes, they're like, when's Conor and Chandler going to fight? He goes, it's tough to wrangle these guys in, man. You know, like they have so much money. It's tough to get these guys in. And I was like, oh, what do you mean? I thought you wrangled them in. What? Well, are we not getting this? You know, so it's like, are they dangling the carrot? I'm like, no, he's going to fight. And then it doesn't happen. Because when I hear Dana say that, I'm like, what do you mean it's tough to wrangle him in? Now, part of me being such a big Conor fan goes, dope. He's set. Doesn't have to fight ever again. He's good for my business. I'd love to watch him fight, so I hope he fights. If he doesn't, that's a good thing. Like, he's so financially set. He's made so many smart decisions. He's earned it right off in the sunset on your Lamborghini yacht. But this Ultimate Fighter is going to be sad if we don't get that fight.
I think we will. I do. I think that we will. I think there's something about, and I can't even put my finger on what it is, but there's something about Conor that he's going to refuse to go out the way, with a broken leg going out of the octagon on a gurney. That's just not how he's going to leave the sport. So I have high hopes. I have no insider knowledge about it, but I have high hopes, and
what's
that's what I'm clinging to.
I'm with you. Me too. Please fight. And what your boy John Kavanaugh, who's Conor's head coach, has he told you like his takeaway from being in the house? Because it's a lot on the coaches too, and him being the head coach, he does most of the work. Like, Conor's there, but really John's designing the training program, putting the kids through it. He's coming up with the game plans. He's spending a little more time with them. Conor's doing his thing, but it falls a lot on John. People don't realize how much work it is for the coaches.
Yeah, a ton of work. And he actually asked to do it because I guess that he, of course, had the chance to do it last time Conor coached, but he had so many obligations with other fighters that he decided he just couldn't dedicate that much time to being in the United States. So it's different for those guys too, to be not just away from their normal gym, but like out of the country completely. So he made a point to do this season. He felt like it was kind of a bucket list thing for him. And I think his biggest takeaway is just how passionate and how all in on this sport Conor is, despite having everything he could have ever dreamed of, imagined, and wanted. And he did say something I thought was interesting. He said, I haven't really seen him in person tons because we hadn't really yet started like fully ramping up training. So he said this, when you see that scene of him sparring, it was one of the first times I'd seen him work out in quite a while. And so I think part of that scene was like kind of proving to Coach Kavanaugh, like, hey, I'm good. Like, we're good to go. We're ready to hit the ground running and, get this camp going.
Yeah, that's good.
That's another reason why I feel really optimistic about a fight being on the horizon as well.
Me too. It'd be a shame if it doesn't work out. And I doubt Conor would do that to the fan base, and just get everybody excited and then just delay it. That's not usually his style. Now, this can be a tough question for you. Being obviously, Dana White Contender Series close to your heart, your big, reason that thing's a success. Now you're involved with Ultimate Fighter. If you're a manager of a fighter, young fighter, and you have an offer to do the next Ultimate Fighter, knowing how the ratings are going, right? The ratings are, they are what they are. It's tough. So you have the Ultimate Fighter, and then you have Dana White Contender Series. Where are you going? Where are you having and your fighter's like, I'm trying to decide. They said I can do either one. Which road do you send them down?
I mean, I'm going to pick Contender Series every time, personally, because I think the Ultimate Fighter is a whole different animal. And if you're not geared mentally to deal with all of the extra pressure of being away from your family and your gym and cutting weight multiple times in a very short period of time, and, getting to be good friends with a guy, and then all of a sudden you're fighting, like, there are so many X factors in that show that make it, I think, even more difficult than Contender Series. Contender Series is a fight, and there's pressure. Dana White sitting right there. And there is kind of what I said earlier about, like, you got this one shot and this one matchup to make an impression, but I'm still going to go Contender Series. And I think that show more and more and more is really churning out top tier talent. And when you go on that show and you do big things, like, there's now a formula, right? Like, we see it every year now. The guys that stand out every year get a huge push their UFC debuts. And if they do well there, the Joe Pyfers of the world,
it's off to the races.
Yeah, off to the races.
Agree. And I'm curious if, because Conor's ratings are this, and they're not bad, don't get me wrong, they're not bad, but it's not gangbusters, but also there's just so much more content out than when, say, season 10, which is the biggest season of all time, not a big deal. But when season 10, it was just a different time. It was on Spike. There wasn't as much competition. So I think the numbers are solid. I'm sure ESPN's happy with it. I'm curious if we're going to get an announcement of the, more Ultimate Fighters on ESPN, not ESPN Plus and, Fight Pass, but actual ESPN. I'm wondering how ESPN feels about it.
What year would season 10 have been? What year was that?
Oh, that would have been 2018. No,
Yeah, 'cause I
no.
think
I'm sorry.
earlier than that, I
have
would think.
CT. That's literally 5 years.
I shouldn't
ago.
laugh.
No, you should. It's fine.
It's not a joke,
I
actually.
definitely have it. No, that would have been 2013.
Yeah, so I think
10
part
years
of it
ago?
too is like just the cultural appetite for reality television in general has kind of
Correct.
changed. So I don't know that we're gonna see that fully shift back. I think it'd be cool to do something like The Ultimate Fighter, but maybe shake up the format a little bit. I have no idea what that looks like. Don't ask me if I have a good idea about that.
Agree. Well, yeah. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Ultimate Fighter, and I hope it just keeps doing great things. I hope to prove me wrong. I hope one of those prospects goes out and does some big things, because then that completely annihilates my argument. And then the UFC's like, yeah, Schaub's wrong again. So they might be right. 2009 was Ultimate Fighter 10. I'm way off.
Yeah. So peak.
That
peak
dude, that was
TV.
like Paris Hilton on reality TV. Real World's popping. I'm on there. I think I like to credit myself. I think it was the Kimbo Slice effect. He was massive back then. Well, we can't let you leave without talking about UFC 289. It's going down on Saturday. Excited for it?
I am excited for it. I think we've got the fight that we wanted to see in Amanda Nunes versus Irene Aldana. I mean,
over the Pena, you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for me personally, and I really like the matchup in terms of, I think it's, even though Amanda Nunes has way more ways to win on paper, she's, I would say, more dangerous in every aspect of the game. Irene Aldana has a particular style of boxing that Amanda hasn't had to deal with yet. Even when she faced Holly Holm, one of the most decorated boxers ever, but the way that Holly fights in MMA is totally different. Like, she's a kickboxer, she floats on the outside. Irene Aldana is going to get right in your face with clean, straight shots, a nice, super educated guard that she stays super safe with. And, you watch the Pena fight, the first one, some of the stuff that Amanda struggled with was, even outside of all of the X factors that I think did contribute to that loss, some of the things that she struggled with was pressure and straight shots. And that's what you get when you get Irene Aldana, who also has phenomenal takedown defense. So although Irene doesn't have like this amazing undefeated record that we can like point at and get all frothy about.
No, not at all.
A skill set that I can definitely get excited about.
She does. And on Monday, when I did the Schaub show, I actually picked Aldana. And then as I sit on it, I do more research. I get to do this breakdown tomorrow for that show, for that fight. I don't know, man. Like, you look at it and you're like, well, hold up. If it's Amanda Nunes that showed up against Pena too, there's no way in hell how's she going to beat her? It's tough to find a route for her to win. And especially if Amanda Nunes, where, she mixed it up on Pena too, when she went to Southpaw, gave her a ton of problems. Her check hook's filthy. And we know Aldana struggles with southpaws. Well, Amanda Nunes is pretty damn good at southpaw.
I was just going to say
that is good. Aldana has the boxing advantage, but Amanda, man, she does everything well. There's a reason why she's the greatest of all time. I think we're all predicating this. Like, when people are picking Aldana, there's also the Mexican factor, right? Mexicans are taking over 3 champs, if you include the interim champ.
Yeah.
So they're doing the damn thing. So I think it's the cool pick, and I actually retract my pick, because if Amanda shows up, that was the Amanda Nunes in the second fight, I don't see it. I just don't see it. And because we're all predicated on Amanda's over it. She doesn't want to do it anymore. She has, I think, a second baby, or she have the second baby already. On
the way in November, I think.
There you go. So the baby's coming. So she's busy with that. She's 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Yeah. If that Amanda shows up, the first fight when she fought Pena, she's probably going to lose. But man, you better pray to God, if you're a fan of Aldana, that does happen. Because if not, she's gonna have a long night in the office, and by long night, I mean a short night.
The southpaw thing could be a real problem, because we did see Aldana struggle a little bit with that, both with Macy Chasson and a few others. And I will say this: there are really not that many female fighters who are true switch dancers and do it fluidly, and who are as offensively and defensively sound out of both stances. So it's not something that women deal with a lot in the training room or in fights. Mm-hmm. And so when you put someone with Amanda's skill set already, and then you add a new tool like that, I mean, it's going to be an uphill battle. And it's funny that you say that, because literally what you just said is kind of where I've been on it. I was very excited about Aldana at first. I'm like, oh, her pressure, her boxing, her power, her size, her athleticism. Like, there's lots to talk about. But then you go watch that Pena 2 fight again. You're like, oh, I don't know.
You're like, yeah, that's where I was. I picked her on Monday, and then again, I do this breakdown tomorrow. I'm watching tape. I'm like, oh, this is not a good matchup. If it's the Amanda Nunes that wants this, she can do whatever she wants. But you gotta, who knows what we're gonna get. I'm excited for that fight. Don't get me wrong, but I think the most exciting fight in the card is Dariush Charles Oliveira.
100%. 100%. And
that's the fight. That fight saved the card. Let's be honest.
It does. And it's the fight that should have happened a long time ago. It's probably the fight that should have had a belt involved with it, but I'm still happy it's happening. I'll take it. And I want your take on this. I think it's really interesting that, like, not that long ago, when we were talking about Charles Oliveira, we as analysts started using all these superlatives, like, one of the greatest lightweights of all time. The best at this, the best at that. Of course, statistically, he is the best finisher, the best submissioner, all that stuff. But I feel like that one loss has really diminished his shine. And I don't understand why. Because, like, Gaethje loses to Khabib. You don't really feel the same lack of shine with Gaethje. You're like, it's still Gaethje. He lost to Khabib. No big deal. But then you got Charles Oliveira, who loses to Islam. And it's like, but Izzy is really, and no one's saying it. It's just a feeling I have. And I don't even know how to put my finger on it.
Me neither. I was saying this on my show on Monday. I don't know what it is. And I apologize to Charles Oliveira. I never pick him. He won like 10, 11 fights. I picked against him every single time. This fight, picking against him, I went, I apologize. I don't know what it is. I have no clue why I do this to you. I like Brazilians. Some of my favorite people. I never pick this guy. I'm not picking him in this fight. And you look at the stats, and then for a while with Charles, because he's been doing it forever, he has so many fights. Remember, there were some fights where he quit. And maybe it's my own personal thing, but when a guy quits, I'm out. Yeah. But somehow he's one of the rare exceptions where he did have that quit in him, and he figured it out, and that's no longer in there, because he could have quit against Chandler. He could have quit against all these other guys, and he finds a way to figure it out even then. And I see it. So I don't call him a quitter anymore. That's not nice. But I pick against the guy, and he's one of the greatest to ever do it. But again, Dariush, I look at that fight. I go, I think Dariush deserves it. To get a title shot if he wins this, for sure deserves it. Being a guy, who was the reigning champ for so long, 100%. If you were to get a finish, you have to give him a title shot. It's his 9th fight win in a row. But with Dariush, I think where he's different is if you look at Charles Oliveira, he will get hit. He'll get hit. In the Chandler fight, he gets hit. And guys are scared to follow that up because they're scared of his jiu-jitsu. Dariush is not scared of his jiu-jitsu. Dariush, compete against Chrome Gracie in straight gi jiu-jitsu, like world champion jiu-jitsu player, phenomenal jiu-jitsu practitioner. He's not going to be scared to go down there. There's nothing that Charles Oliveira offers down there that Dariush hasn't seen before. So he'll follow it up and get the finish. And I could see him not only getting a finish via TKO, but I could see him submitting him with like a rear naked down there or something.
100%. And it's also that the threat of the submission game is also what has made Charles's striking game so dangerous as of late, because any threat of a takedown, any threat of a back take, any threat of a snap down, grab the neck, guys are always having to think about that other thing. Yep. And, Beneil Dariush just isn't going to have to do that. And I'm not the only one saying this. I think Beneil Dariush has a better grappling game or MMA than Charles Oliveira does, which I realize sounds ridiculous.
It doesn't. You're 100% on the ball with that. He has a better grappling game for mixed martial arts, and it's also his fundamentals, I think, are better. Now, who's more dangerous? Probably Charles Oliveira, as far as like in transition with the Darces and the guillotines and the arm bars.
He's very opportunistic.
Correct. But as far when it comes down to like the fundamentals and like the technical aspect of it, Dariush all day. I just trained Dariush. He's a nightmare. Monster. So I'm picking Dariush, and I apologize, Charles Oliveira. I picked this 11th fight, 10 years in a row. I pick against the guy. I don't know why. Couldn't tell you why.
Did Beneil ever fold you up?
No. Don't get crazy. Come on. I'm 400 pounds. Come on now.
I know.
No, it's rare we roll together. We were at Black House together, but just the nicest guy. Like he's for sure getting to heaven before me. Like he's so close with Jesus Christ.
I don't think it works like that.
Well, that's what I tell myself.
If you're Catholic, maybe it does. We're Protestant. We don't believe in all that.
Yeah, I don't know what I am, but I just know that he is Jesus's cell phone and I don't, So he's definitely into heaven before me. Besides that, I mean, this UFC is good, but there's 2 really good fights on. The rest of them are good fights. Nothing to knock your hair back. But then after this, it's gangbusters. Like UFC's dropping pay-per-view. I can't wait for it.
This late summer, fall, even into the winter. I mean, the rest of 22-23 is going to be bananas. Absolutely bananas.
Do you think we get Jones versus Stipe?
I think we get Jones versus somebody. I'm not feeling. I always had to hesitate to say this because people are like, oh, maybe she knows something. I don't know anything, but I don't know. I feel like for a second there, people started being like, "Oh, Pavlovich is great. Which to me always indicates that maybe there's, I don't know.
Yeah, rumblings. Well, I think the rumor started. I'll take credit for. Well, Chael Sonnen should take credit for.
Oh,
this.
So that was you.
It was me and Chael, but it was Chael breaking the news, and Chael's boys with everybody in the UFC, so. He was like, the Stipe fight's not getting done. It's going to be Pavlich in August. And I was like, what? And so he broke that news on here. But then shortly after that, I get a text from him and a guy very close to John and going, no. Stipe actually signed the deal. It's happening.
Oh, okay.
So I think Stipe and John is going to happen in November, Madison Square Garden.
Well, I love that.
We'll see.
Love that.
We'll see. I think I'm more confident in Stipe and John fighting than Conor and Chandler. I gotta be honest. This year. I'm not. What we should make a little friendly wager on it. We should. I think we get both. John has to fight. Stipe has to fight. I think there's something went into it too with Stipe's contract. I think he only had 1 fight on his contract. He's waiting to see what happened with the Francis stuff. He could have went over to PFL. Yeah. I think there's a lot going on there.
Do you think if John beats Stipe, do you think he retires?
God, that's a good question. Yes. What else is he going to do? Hang around for the winner of Almeida and Curtis Blades?
Yeah,
what's Pavlich? Like, let's say he waits for Pavlich, which sells, I don't know, 100,000 pay-per-views, and the guy's
and Pavlich is dangerous, and he has no brand value.
Terrifying. He what he is? He's the Jokic of the UFC. Yeah. He's probably the best heavyweight. Not named John Jones, hits like a Mack truck, not an ounce of fat on him. This Russian destroyer. Americans aren't familiar with him. He's like Jokic. I don't know if you watch basketball. My Denver Nuggets playing tonight, but he's like Jokic. He's the MVP of the league. He's the best player. He's tough to market, but he's so damn good. That's like Pavlich. It's like, this guy is a nightmare, man. Yeah. And for John, he's like, why? What do I have to prove? Exactly. That'd be a bummer if he retires. Because let's say Jones retires after that, and then let's say, heaven forbid, Conor loses. He retires. Yeah. They're going to force me to retire. What am I going to cover? Who are we going to cover? You know what I'm saying? I know what we're going to do. We're going to have to start a cooking show or something. Yeah, for reals. You got to hope Sugar Sean comes along and he's the next Conor with the rainbow hair. For sure. I don't know. For sure. But I'm excited. I appreciate you doing this. Really do. Last thing, because I don't get to verbally spar with anybody. It's just me by myself ranting in the camera. So I feel like I have the best ideas. What would you do to change MMA judging? Clearly a problem. Clearly we have a problem. And people just go, you can't leave it in the hands of the judges. That doesn't work for me. All these people are good. People don't realize that when you say you can't leave it in the hands of the judges, you don't understand like how good Volkanovski and Makhachev are. You have at that level, the top, I'll say top 50 in some weight classes. They're so damn good. You can't say that. Those guys are so damn tough to get out of there. So we have to fix the judging. But I don't know what you do. Well, there's two things. There's a more immediate solution, and there's a long-term solution. The long-term solution is to continue to tweak and perfect the criteria, because I do think that there are some things about the criteria that could be made better, especially if you got more fighters involved with writing them. But that is a really tough thing to change, because you got 50 different cats going 50 different directions with all sorts of different, we don't want to do it. It's really tough to get 50 different commissions to move at once. Even it's hard to get the top 5 to all be on the same page about stuff. So say we shelf that.
I think
that's the best idea, though. Hate to interrupt you. That's the best idea because the curriculum that they have to judge off of is all messed up. So just starting there, the way they judge fights is an issue. But carry on.
Yeah, but here's the real thing. Anytime, take MMA out of it. Anytime you want to get more accurate results mathematically, you have to make the numbers bigger. If you're talking about averages, if you're talking about means, medians, I mean, I'm guessing we've all taken some amount of basic statistics. The sample size has to be bigger. Correct. So imagine if you go from 3 judges to 5 judges. Imagine if you go from 5 judges to 7 judges. Imagine if you've got, 5 judges on site and another 7 judges in a quiet booth offsite somewhere. Now, I understand as you get bigger and bigger, cost, yada, yada, yada.
This is what I said.
But like
more judges and then
more judges.
And you've been cage side. It's impossible to see what's kind of going on in the grand scheme of things. I don't care who you are. Even for me, a trained eye, been in a million gyms, been in a million fights. It's like, what's going on there? And then I gotta score it. Now, if they had the same access that we have on TV and they're in a remote location in Vegas somewhere, no, they're not swayed by the audience. They're not swayed by the commentating. They're watching in silence on their own in their own room, dark room, and you give them food, but whatever, and water.
Like dark room,
dark
no
room.
Food, no water,
we hit them if they get it wrong. We hit them. We waterboard them if they get it wrong. No, but
they have electrodes strapped to their nipples.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. They're naked. Wait, what? No, but I do think that there has to be something to that. More judges and not just going based off the ringside judging. That's insane. Yes.
And here's one thing that people often forget about. It's not just like everybody wants to say, oh, we got terrible judges. I'm sorry. That's a lazy thing to say.
Agree.
It really is. I'm not saying it doesn't exist at all. I do think there's been some poor judging that we can point to, but as a generality, I disagree with it. As a generality, I just disagree with that. And I think it's a lazy thing that we have a tendency to say. I think a lot of things that people forget about. So for instance, one judge sits on the side of the octagon where the door is. Okay. You're then talking about 4 turnbuckles. They can't get up and walk around.
No.
Now they have a screen, which frankly, most of the time when we've been like, oh, these judges are looking at their phones. They're not looking at their phones. They're looking at their monitors because they can't see what's happening. As someone who calls these fights, sometimes I don't say things because I'm like, I'm not really sure what's happening right now because my angle, both in my reality view as well as what's being shown to me on the camera, is not enough for me to understand if there's a submission happening or not.
Now, imagine if you had to say something because that's your job, like the judges, where they have to score it. You have to say something. People are like, Laura's way off, man. That's not
and
you're like, I can't see.
You cannot judge what you cannot see. That's how they're taught. Like, if you don't see it, you can't assume that something is there. So there's all these little things that I think the general public doesn't always take into consideration. But to me, the biggest, easiest solution is more judges. You make the numbers bigger, then you make the results more accurate. That's just math. It's just factual. Imagine a world where one of those votes, one of those judges was actually a compilation of trained maybe media professionals. Like, you have to pass a test on the criteria. You can't just be like, I'm sorry, but the fan base cannot vote, because that becomes a popularity contest.
No, you can't do that.
It sounds cool, but
NBA does that at the All-Star game. Yao Ming was like the #1 player because of the Chinese every year.
You can't do that. You have to have relatively unbiased people who are educated in the criteria, but maybe you've got 50 media members and you collect all of their votes into one vote, and that becomes one of the judges. There's a number of ways to make the numbers much, much bigger. Therefore, you take out the outliers, the bad decision whether one way, the bad decision this way in every single round, and you end up with more accurate results. It's just that's how math works.
I'm with you. And to piggyback on the idea, let's say you want to leave it as 3 judges, but those aren't 3 individual people. So for the first judge, that's the media. That's the 50 media members. The second is all former retired fighters, 50 fighters that know what the hell's going on, that fought at the highest level. Then the third one can be whatever you decide you want to make it. But again, you get a bigger sample size of people that have an idea what the hell's going on, and they're not from the boxing world.
Yeah.
Hopefully you do it.
Yeah. I mean, I think more and more, I'm trying to remember, I had this written down someplace. the whole boxing judge thing, that is changing. Predominantly, they're not boxing judges anymore. That's been something that has shifted over time as more and more people have actually come up as MMA informed individuals who actually came into judging simply to judge MMA. There still is the
scorecards would beg to differ, but yeah.
Yeah, well, there's still a contingency of boxing judges, but when you sit down and you ask these guys, okay, name the judges who came into MMA judging from boxing, and they'll tell you. And there's about, I'm going to say the number wrong, so I almost don't want to say it, but it's not as many as you would think.
Yeah, it's a low number. Yeah, that's good. Step in the right direction. I think the only time there's a change is when it affects the UFC's bottom line. The fighter's bottom line, it's not going to change. It has to affect the UFC. It has to get so bad where it affects the UFC's bottom line. Where some, say Conor, not now, but in his heyday, was going to decision. They kept giving it to the other guy. And the UFC's like, what are we doing here, man? This guy clearly won. He's the face of the freaking UFC. That would make a change because they'd have to. Like, we can't have this happening. In boxing, they obviously have a huge issue because they want to keep the guy the face of boxing, so they score the judges his way, which is a whole another corrupt system. But
the other biggest, easiest thing to do is, and I don't like the term accountability because then again, it has this connotation of like, you guys are screwing up and we want to punish you for it. I just want transparency.
Me too.
Like after a night like Albazi versus Kaikar France, and it doesn't even have to be that specific judge. Like I understand that not everybody feels comfortable being put on a spotlight and grilled by the media or whoever, but have a representative just like the NBA does. A referee's representative that will come out and say, hey, here, I had a discussion with these judges. This is exactly why it was judged this way. You could even fucking bring clips up. Like, see this? This is what this is. Like, I remember one time, sorry, I'm making this insanely long, Brendan. You can cut me off at any time. But
keep going.
I'm very passionate about judging. The Sean O'Malley versus Petr Yan fight was a super close one.
Very close.
And I ended up talking to two of those judges who scored it in a way that a lot of people here felt like was inaccurate. They scored it for Sean. And honestly, so much of it came down to, I think it was the first round. There's a takedown where Petr gets him, elevates him, but Sean posts, and then he gets the takedown. So typically when you're scoring takedowns, they don't matter at all unless there is elevation, amplitude, and impact. Mm-hmm. He got the elevation, but he did not have impactful impact because of the way Sean posted. So it wasn't.
Would there have to be control too, right? Like it's the same thing with the Henry Cejudo DJ fight. Like that's takedowns. Like it's not in wrestling. Even in wrestling, where the takedown originated from, that is not that they would not count that as a takedown. That's what DC had to come out and say. DC's Mr. Wrestling was an Olympic team, and he's like, hold. I think it was him and Dominic Cruz were like arguing over it, and DC was like, hold up. In our sport of wrestling, dude, which he teaches. He teaches camps, Olympian, Oklahoma State national champion. He's like, that would not even count in our sport, let alone the UFC, man, in mixed martial arts. So I think the definition of a takedown, they're getting more educated on it. I can't believe you talked to one. I don't even know what they look like, but I think I just assume like these warlocks, like, but I do think
they're both brown belts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like, I think
I'd like it if they're black belts, but that's fine. Right?
Well, they're on their way.
They're two-striped white belts, man. They know what the hell's going on. Oh, really? No, but it does help. They're at least brown belts. But I think, there should be some accountability, whether it's a representative, like you said, that's a great idea if they're scared to talk in front of a camera. Also, don't be a judge if you can't talk about it. But then I think you could also do the way they do like those drug bust videos where they have like the gang member and they like blur out his face. And then he's like, I scored it for Petr Yan, so we don't know what they look like.
Cross-reference it.
It'd be sick.
But yeah. No, I know what you're saying.
Just spitballing ideas here.
No, I love it. Those are all really, really solid.
But the accountability thing should be something because I guarantee
that could be done tomorrow.
I know.
Like, and it doesn't cost anything. And it would build so much trust. Like, again, the perceptions that we all have are because we don't really know, and maybe they're right, but maybe they're not right, and we just don't know. I interviewed an NBA referee because I was curious to see how they handle things. They have a system for every single fuck up ever over there, and they even tweet about it. Like the NBA has a Twitter handle for their NBA officials.
I love that.
And when they mess up a call, They literally tweet out like, in this game, this call was made and that was a bad call. And here's what we're doing about it. And this ref is being, benched for a couple games, or we don't feel like any sort of repercussions are necessary, but it was wasn't a good call. Like they just say it.
And again, I think that for the fans, like, okay, at least they're explaining it. I don't agree with it, but that's how they got there. Good enough. The transparency is the biggest issue, I think, in MMA judging, because it's their way or the highway. So then that's when you get all these conspiracies and all this stuff. It makes it worse. Where if they just had, to your point, a representative, you don't want to single them out. They have their own accounts because they get more hate than I do. They get annihilated. Yeah. So we don't want that for them. And they're chasing after their family or whatever. But again, if you just had like MMA, Reffing Inc. or whatever, and they have their own platform and they would discuss why they came to that conclusion, the transparency would help so many people out.
It would help educate people on the criteria too. There's still a lot of people that feel like control time or, octagon control is a part of what makes a round score a certain way. And it's just not.
Yeah, I mean, Don McCruz on Calbat's Fight Campaign, which we need to get you on, but Don McCruz on Calbat's Fight Campaign, he was saying,
I love that. Yeah,
it'd be so much fun. But Don was on there and he was saying, I sat in and they educated me on what they're judging. He goes, damage is number one.
Yeah.
He's like, people forget, like, a damage is number one, man. And people don't take that in consideration.
Yeah. And one last point too, that blew my mind, because I was in the same class that he took, actually sat next to him. It was really funny because he was so annoyed the whole time.
I bet.
Yeah. He did not want to be there. The thing that blew my mind, I had no idea. I'd never heard before, not to do with judging, but sort of interrelated. The statistics that the UFC puts up for significant strikes. Every single strike at distance is considered significant. It could be the lightest jab, the lightest, distance finding jab ever. It's significant. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, that is how they've defined it. So again, when you look at it, I need to watch the Mirabazi Kai Kara-France fight again, because I think that might have played a really big role, because it makes no sense to me that we count a distance finding jab as significant, but the judges are specifically, no, we only judge on damage. Like those those are polar opposite things.
Agree.
So we're showing the audience a number that says there were X number of significant strikes. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, significant means that they did damage. Well, absolutely not.
Yeah, it's 100%
not.
Yeah, I'd see the Kai Kara-France decision, and then even the Sean O'Malley over Peter Yan decision. Those I really don't have any questions. I would like if they came out and told me how they scored it, but those are so close. I'm like, I can come to conclusion how they got there. No issues. It's like when you get the GSP, Johnny Hendricks, or the Patty Pimlet fight, right? Gordon. Those, I'm like, what the hell's going on there?
Yeah.
When they're super close and nobody got robbed, it's tough. I get it.
I flipped out about even though the right person won, Corey Sandhagen versus Chito Vera, the fact that a judge gave Chito Vera that fight was ludicrous. There's background to that. There's background to that. That judge had judged 3 fights at that level before being put in a main event in Kansas City.
Well, you ready for this?
That's the stuff that should not happen.
Get ready for this. This definitely shouldn't happen. So Corey Sandhagen, good buddy of mine, I've known Corey since he was 15. We're from the same hometown, known him forever. He comes on food truck right after that. Yeah. And he goes, you want to hear something about that judge? And he said, I think on the Ultimate Fighter and the Kid, he goes, that judge, because Corey does a lot of coaching and cornering in Denver. And they were in, I think, Colorado Springs. And one of his fighters was fighting. And this judge just screwed his fighter over. So Corey goes up to him after the fight in the hall, and they get into it. Bad. And so that would equal that, because when Corey goes, I got home, I'm looking at the score and I'm like, what the hell? And then he's like, hold up, how do I know that guy? Looks it up, he's like, oh, that's the guy. And he was like, it was bad. Like, I mean, he was like, there's no filter altercation, but verbal shouting, and like he was calling me like cuss words, and he was like, it's bad.
There are all sorts of rules about conflicts of interest, which is why I will probably never judge in Missouri, because I know too many people here. I'm too connected to gyms here. Like, conflicts of interest are a real important rule that people need to follow. And so never mind the fact that he'd only judged 3 fights. He clearly should not have been judging that fight. So thank God Corey won.
Last thing on judging, especially refereeing in the NBA. This just came out. It was this NBA referee. He grew up in Boston. His family's the biggest Boston Celtics fans. They looked into his data because he got busted with a burner account. Because when people would roast like the calls, they found out there's this one account like sticking up for him. So they look into it. It's him, clearly, dumbass. But they looked more into it, and he would do the NBA finals and the NBA playoffs and all the Celtic games. When he's the ref for the Celtics, they're 22-2. So they found out, like, and he grew up, he can't help it. He grew up in Boston. His family lives, breathes Boston Celtics. And there's this funny video where they like, the guy makes a 3 to win the game to beat the Celtics. And he goes, oh, like he's pissed. Like during the game, people are like, come on, dude, what are you doing, bro? He's all shit. Like, hey, what are you doing? Yeah. So it just goes to show you, like I could never be a ref. I have too many friends. I'm super biased. I say that with all my picks. Don't listen to me. If the guy hung out with the guy for a night, had some drinks, that's my guy.
Same.
Don't listen to me on picks. People are like, oh, you're so off. Yeah, I pick all the guys.
I know.
Every time.
Yeah.
Every time.
100%.
Unless you're Charles Oliveira. But I've never met him. But if I did, I'd probably pick him more. Well, you're the best. Are you working UFC 289?
I am, but I'll be on the ESPN desk in Bristol. So we're doing the post-fight show and the pre-show and UFC Live are in Bristol, Connecticut. So that's where I will be with Anthony Smith.
Oh, I love Anthony. Tell him I said what's up. And then any news on the next time you're doing the straight up commentating?
Yeah, July, is it 1st or 2nd? Whatever Saturday that is, the very first Saturday in July, I've got that card next, and then a few more on the horizon.
Yeah, love it. Crushing it. Superstar.
Thank you.
You're the best.
Appreciate you.
Thank you so much.